I always saw her first before anyone else in the cafe. Not because she tried to be seen, she never did, but because she moved in a way that slowed everything down. Like the sound of her stirring sugar into tea could cancel out the chatter and the clinking cups around us. She wasn't my boss or my professor or anyone who was supposed to matter in my life. She was my aunt's friend, mid-40s, a little older than the people I usually crossed paths with. But whenever I slipped into that corner seat, pretending to scroll my phone, she was there by the window, a book open, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. I tell myself I came for the coffee, but that was a lie. I don't even like coffee. It sits half cold in front of me most mornings, milk curdling at the edges. Sometimes we'd exchange nothing more than a nod. Sometimes, if she was in the mood, she'd ask how my aunt was doing, her tone careful, like she wasn't really asking about my aunt at all. That morning, I caught her looking at my hands. Not in an obvious way, but I noticed because she looked away too quickly, pressing her lips together like she'd been caught. My hands were rough, still carrying the smell of machine oil from the part-time shifts I worked at the auto shop. I flexed them under the table, unsure what she'd seen. When I finally walked up to her table, because the silence felt heavier than my hesitation, she glanced at me, half smiling. "You work with your hands, don't you?" she asked, her voice soft, casual, like it was an afterthought. "Yeah," I said, scratching the back of my neck, mostly fixing what other people break. That made her laugh, quiet, almost private. She closed her book, tapping the cover with one finger. Useful skill. Not many people can do that anymore. I shrugged, because what was I supposed to say? My throat felt too tight for anything clever. Instead, I folded the napkin I was holding, edge over edge, until it was a perfect square, then unfolded it again. She watched me, and I could feel the air between us shifting, like something had been set in motion without either of us agreeing to it. "You know," she said finally, "your aunt was telling me about the shelves in her kitchen, crooked as anything. Maybe you could show me how skilled you really are." It wasn't flirtation, at least not on the surface. It was practical, harmless, but the way her eyes lingered on mine when she said it, like the words had been tested before they left her mouth, made my stomach tighten. "Sure," I managed, voice low. "I could take a look." She nodded, almost like she'd expected me to refuse, and then slipped her glasses back on. Conversation over. I went back to my corner seat, pretending to check a text that wasn't there. My phone screen reflected my own face, tired and younger than hers, and for a moment I felt the weight of the age between us, the years she'd already lived through and the ones I hadn't touched yet. When I finally left, she didn't look up. Just a small wave without meeting my eyes, as if to say, "This is nothing." Or maybe it's not. Later, as I sat in my car outside the cafe, my phone buzzed. A new message, from a number I didn't recognize. It read, "Tomorrow evening, bring your tools." Her kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something warm she must have baked hours before I arrived. I set my toolbox down by the crooked shelves, trying to act like this was routine, like I did this sort of thing for everyone. But it wasn't routine. Not with her. She handed me a mug of tea, her hand brushing mine for a second too long when I took it. I noticed she never touched people much. She kept her body folded in, neat, contained. That made the small touch feel louder than it should have. "Be careful," she said, nodding toward the loose bracket. "It's been like that for years. I just never got around to fixing it." Years. I tried not to picture those years, her life lived while I was still figuring out high school, while I was still someone's kid instead of someone standing in her kitchen, holding her mug. I steadied the shelf, tightening the screws. My hands shook a little, though I told myself it was just the cheap screwdriver slipping. "You do this often?" she asked. "Fixing things?" "Yeah." I paused, turning the tool slowly. "It's easier than people. Shelves don't argue back." She laughed short, soft. Then her voice dropped. "My ex used to say that too." The word ex hung in the air, heavier than the shelf itself. I didn't ask, but I didn't need to. The way her eyes flicked away, the way her fingers curled against the edge of the counter, told me enough. I wanted to say something comforting, but the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I kept working, the silence between us thick but not uncomfortable. When I finished, I tested the shelf. It held steady, stronger than before. "Looks better," I said, stepping back. She tilted her head, studying it. Then, quietly, "You remind me of someone. Younger, but the way you concentrate. My brother used to sit like that when he painted." Caught me off guard that she would compare me to family. Not to a lover, not to a stranger, but to someone she clearly missed. I didn't know if it made me feel closer to her or farther away. I nodded, unsure what to say. My throat was dry. We sat at the small table after tea cooling between us. She didn't fill the silence. Neither did I. Sometimes our eyes met, then darted away again, as if looking too long would make the whole thing real. I kept thinking about my aunt. How she would laugh if she knew I was here. How she would never see the quiet pull in the space between us. And maybe that was why it felt risky. Not just the age, but the closeness. Like stepping too far in would leave no way back. When I finally stood to leave, she reached out, almost without thinking, and brushed a bit of dust from my shoulder. It was nothing, a casual gesture, an automatic kindness. But the way her hand lingered, just a second longer than it had to, felt like a door cracking open. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to step through or slam it shut. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. I was dropping by my aunt's house to return a book she'd lent me, and there she was, already sitting at the kitchen table, laughing softly at something my aunt said. Her presence hit me like a shift in air pressure. The casual kind of domestic intimacy, like she belonged there in a way I didn't. She glanced at me briefly when I walked in. Just a small flicker of recognition, nothing more. But my chest tightened anyway. "Didn't expect to see you," she said later, when my aunt stepped into the other room to grab something. Her tone was easy. Too easy. Like we hadn't shared a long silence over tea. Like her hand hadn't brushed my shoulder just days before. I wanted to say something, but words felt too dangerous in my mouth. So I shrugged, looking at the book in my hand. "Returning this," I muttered. She nodded, adjusted the sleeve of her sweater, avoided my eyes. That was the first pullback. Subtle, but sharp enough that I felt it. The conversation that followed was nothing, just small talk about weather and errands. But it felt like standing on thin ice. Every word carefully placed so nothing cracked open. When my aunt came back, she looked at us strangely. Not suspicious, just curious. Like she'd walked into the end of a sentence she couldn't hear. I kept my gaze low, flipping the book's cover open and shut, over and over. Later, when I was leaving, I heard footsteps behind me. "You missed a screw last time," she said, quiet, almost teasing. "Shelf wobbles if you lean on it." I stopped at the doorway, turned. She was closer than I expected, too close for something so ordinary. I wanted to laugh, to make some easy reply, but I couldn't. Her nearness tangled the words up. "Maybe I'll fix it again," I said finally, voice low. Her eyes held mine for a second too long. Then she exhaled, almost like a sigh, and stepped back. "I shouldn't. I mean," she trailed off, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. And just like that, the space between us shifted again. Something pulled tight, something neither of us dared to name. For a moment, I thought she might reach out. Or maybe I almost did. My hand twitched at my side, useless. But then the sound of my aunt calling from inside shattered it. A simple, ordinary sound. We froze. And when she looked at me again, her expression was unreadable. Not rejection. Not invitation. Just something caught in the middle. I left without saying goodbye. But the feeling of her almost hand on my arm, her almost words in the air, those followed me all the way home. It was late. Too late for errands, too late for excuses. Still, I found myself outside after work, walking the long way home, hoping, without admitting it, that I might see her. And I did. She was sitting on the low bench near the park entrance, hands folded over a paper bag, waiting for the bus that never seemed to come on time. I almost kept walking. Almost. But she looked up, and the half-smile that flickered across her face felt like permission. "Long day?" I asked, sitting a careful distance away. Always, she said. Her voice carried fatigue, but also something softer, like she wasn't sorry I'd stopped. We sat in silence, the kind that felt louder than traffic. I watched the way she traced a circle on the bag with her finger, over and over, as if the motion steadied her. I wanted to ask 100 things. Why she looked so far away. Why she'd pulled back at my aunt's house. Why she hadn't called again about the shelf. Instead, I said, "Sometimes I don't know what you're thinking." Her finger stopped moving. She glanced at me, then away. Maybe that's better. The words caught me, heavy, careful, like she was protecting both of us. "I don't think so," I said too quickly. Then softer, "I want to know." That broke something. She pressed her lips together, exhaling through her nose, her eyes fixed on the ground. "My life isn't simple," she said finally. "I've already gone through things. Divorce, mistakes. And you," she gestured at me, almost sharply, "you're 20. You should be making new ones, not carrying someone else's." I swallowed hard. "It's not like that." Her laugh was bitter, quiet. "Isn't it? You think this is easy? That I don't think about?" She stopped herself, biting back the rest. The silence stretched. My chest felt too tight to breathe. "I notice everything," I said, words spilling before I could stop them. "The way you don't finish your tea. The way you laugh at things no one else hears. The way you look away before I can. Before I can really look at you." Her shoulders stiffened. She didn't turn, but I could see the way her hands trembled against the paper bag. "That's not fair," she whispered. "You're making me feel." She broke off again. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, fighting the urge to reach for her hand. "Then tell me to stop," I said quietly. The seconds dragged, each one heavier than the last. She finally turned, eyes wet but steady. Her lips parted, like she might speak, or close the gap between us. But the roar of the arriving bus split the moment. Brakes squealing, lights flooding the bench. She stood quickly, clutching the bag like a shield. "I should go," she said, voice barely audible. And before I could answer, she was stepping onto the bus, the doors closing between us with a hiss that sounded final. But her eyes had said something else. I didn't see her for almost a week. No texts, no accidental meetings at the cafe. Not even a glimpse of her car in the driveway when I passed by my aunt's street. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. People get busy. She had a life before me, a life outside of me. But every time my phone lit up, I half expected her name, even though she'd never once texted me first. The silence pressed harder than words ever could. On the 6th day, I walked past the cafe anyway. Habit. Weakness. She wasn't there. Her seat by the window sat empty, the sunlight hitting the glass in a way that made it impossible to look at without squinting. I almost left, but then the bell above the door jingled. It was her. She looked different, though. Hair tied back loosely, no book in hand, phone pressed to her ear, and her voice sharp, impatient. She was arguing with someone. I said I'd call later. "Not now." A pause. Then softer, "Yes, I know. I will." Her eyes found mine across the room. For a moment, something flickered, recognition, apology. But then she turned away. She didn't sit by the window this time. She took her coffee to go. And as she passed me, she whispered just enough for me to hear, "You shouldn't be here." No explanation. No room for questions. I sat there long after she left, my coffee untouched. That night, I found myself drafting a message. Who was on the phone? Did I do something? "Are you okay?" I typed, deleted, retyped, stared at the blinking cursor. But I never pressed send. 2 days later, my aunt called me. Casual, nothing serious. At the end of the conversation, she mentioned it like a side note. "Did you know she has a daughter? College age. Back home visiting for a while." The words landed sharp. A daughter. It explained things. The distance, the warning in her voice, the way she'd vanished. It also made everything more complicated. I pictured her kitchen, the crooked shelf I'd fixed, the tea we hadn't finished. Then I imagined someone else sitting at that table. A girl maybe just a few years younger than me. The gap between us suddenly wider, heavier. I didn't go to the cafe after that. Didn't walk past her street. Didn't trust myself not to knock on her door. But at night, my phone stayed by my bed, screen dark, waiting for a message I wasn't sure would ever come. I thought of writing again. Just a simple "I miss our talks." Or even "I can fix the shelf again." But the draft box stayed full. And signed. Unsent. And the seat by the window remained empty. It was raining the night I saw her again. Not a storm. Just the kind of rain that makes everything smell like metal and earth. Soft enough to hear against the leaves. She was unlocking her front door. Groceries balanced awkwardly in one arm. When I came up the steps behind her. I hadn't planned it. I'd only been walking, circling blocks I shouldn't have. And there she was. She froze when she noticed me. Not startled, just still. "You shouldn't," she started, then stopped. Her keys trembled in her hand. "I know," I said quickly. My voice sounded rougher than I meant it to. "But I can't keep pretending I don't see you. That I don't think about you." Her eyes flicked to the bags. Then to the rain. Anywhere but me. I thought she might tell me to leave. She almost did. I saw the words press against her lips and retreat. "Do you know what you're asking for?" she said at last, barely above the rain. "No," I swallowed. "But I know what it feels like when you're not there." The groceries slid slightly in her arm, and without thinking, I reached to steady them. My hand brushed hers. Just that. But neither of us moved away. "You're too young," she whispered. The same line she'd been building like a wall between us. "I don't care." My chest tightened, the words raw. "I'm here. That's all I know how to be." She closed her eyes. Rain dotted her hair, her lashes. For a long moment, I thought she would finally push me back. Tell me this was foolish. Instead, she set the groceries down on the step, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. When my daughter came home, I thought, if you saw her, if you remembered how close you two are in age, you'd step back. That maybe it would end on its own. I didn't move, didn't speak. "But you didn't," she said, her voice breaking softer now. "And I didn't either." Silence swelled between us, heavier than the rain. Then, almost without meaning to, I said, "Just tell me if you want me gone. I'll go. I just need to hear it from you." Her eyes opened slowly, finding mine, wet with rain, with something else. "I don't want you gone." The words landed simple, final. Neither of us moved closer, not yet. The risk still hung there. Age, family, consequences. But for once, there was no denying, no half-silence left. She reached out first. Not for a kiss, not for anything reckless. Just her hand on my sleeve, fingers curling lightly around the fabric. "Okay," she said, almost a breath. And in that quiet, under the soft fall of rain, it was enough. It didn't happen all at once. Not after the rain, not after the night she said okay. Things just shifted. Small routines stretched out into something steadier. I started fixing things around her house more often. Not because she asked, but because I noticed. A loose hinge, a flickering bulb. She'd set tea on the counter without a word, and I'd drink half before it cooled. She still never finished hers. That was something I stopped trying to change. We didn't talk about what we were, not in those words. There was no label, no announcement. Just mornings where I'd catch her at the cafe, still choosing the seat by the window, and she'd nod at me, a quiet signal that I was welcome. Sometimes my aunt joined, sometimes she didn't. The risk was still there, but softer now, less like a threat and more like a shadow we both learned to live with. The first time I stayed late, helping her stack boxes in the hallway, I realized I didn't feel the same edge of hesitation anymore. She moved slower than me, careful with her back, and I teased her lightly. She rolled her eyes but smiled. And when I carried the last box, she brushed my arm on purpose. Not an accident. Not a mistake. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. Weeks stretched into months. She told me pieces of herself in fragments. Her daughter's laughter, her fear of empty houses, the way she still woke sometimes at 3 a.m., heart racing from old memories she never explained. I didn't press her for the rest. I just listened. One night we sat again on that same park bench, the one where the bus had broken us apart weeks earlier. It was late, the sky faint with stars, and neither of us spoke for a long time. She finally said, "Do you remember what time it was?" "That first morning at the cafe." 8:47, I answered, without thinking. She laughed. Quiet, surprised. "Of course you do." The sound of it settled something in me. Like all the hesitation, the doubt, the stops and starts had led here, to this ordinary bench, this ordinary night. I reached for her hand. She let me hold it. No one watching, no one asking questions. Just the two of us sitting in the quiet, knowing. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't supposed to be, but it was ours. And as I looked at her, her eyes softer now, her shoulders finally at ease, I thought, this is enough. More than enough. A shelf fixed. A tea unfinished. A bench remembered. Things that only we would carry. Did this story stay with you? If you felt something in the silences between them, tell me, what kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?